My official transfer request sat on my desk unsigned, my 4 hands trembling above it. 47 minutes had passed since I sealed myself inside this supply closet. My emergency beacon was still blinking red. Outside the door I could hear them. 7 voices. Calm, patient, amused. "Doctor, we brought you tea," said the one called Parker. "The green kind, your favorite now, right?" I did not answer. I could not answer. My secondary mandibles were clicking together in a panic response my species had not shown in over 3,000 years. My name is Dr. Vestigial Maconthresh. I hold 4 doctorates from the finest academies in the galactic Concord. I am considered the leading expert on emerging behavioral patterns of newly contacted species, and I was hiding from 7 teenagers. Let me explain how I got here. 3 months ago, I received the assignment of a lifetime. The Galactic Concord Academy had accepted its first ever mixed-species cadet class, and I had been chosen to observe and document the human recruits. 7 of them, a small squad designated as Squad 7. My colleagues at the Xenobiology department celebrated my appointment. My mentor, Old Vresh, did not celebrate. She looked at me with all 6 of her eyes and said one thing. "Be careful, Vestigial. Humans are not what the reports say they are." I laughed. I actually laughed at her. I remember it clearly because I rarely laugh. My species is not known for humor, but the idea that primates from a small blue planet could somehow trouble a Cathari scholar of my standing seemed absurd. I had studied the acid-breathing lizards of Corvani 7. I had catalogued the mind-linked swarms of Threshold 9. What could 7 young humans possibly do that I could not predict, measure, and document? I arrived at the academy on a bright morning. The twin suns of the training world cast long shadows across the parade ground. I wore my formal research robes, all 4 sleeves pressed and clean. My datapad was loaded with observation protocols. My research notes were organized into 17 separate categories. I was, in every measurable way, prepared. The 7 cadets stood in a neat line when I entered the briefing room. I studied them carefully. 3 female, 4 male. Ages ranging from 18 to 22 standard years. Different skin tones, different heights, different backgrounds according to their files. They came from places with names like London, Lagos, Seoul, Buenos Aires, Toronto, Mumbai, and a small town in the middle of North America that I had never heard of before. Their names, I quickly learned, were simple: Parker, Holt, Dawson, Brooks, Fletcher, Hayes, and the quiet one, Quinn. I announced myself with the full formality my species requires. I explained my credentials. I told them exactly why I was there. "I have been assigned to observe your behavioral patterns during your training period," I said, speaking through my translator. "I will be documenting your responses to stress, your problem-solving approaches, and your social dynamics. I want you to know this is not a secret study. I believe in open science." They all smiled at me. 7 sets of teeth appeared at once. My translator helpfully noted that humans showed teeth as a sign of friendliness, not aggression. I made a mental note of this reaction and marked it as positive cooperation. "That sounds really interesting, Doctor," said the one called Parker. She had dark hair tied back in what humans called a ponytail. Her eyes were bright and sharp. "We'd love to help with your research." "Yeah," said Fletcher, the tall one with sandy hair. "Just let us know what you need us to do." I felt pleased. This would be simple. I explained my observation schedule in detail. I told them when I would be watching, where my office was located, and even which hours I preferred to work. I believed transparency would produce more natural behavior. I believed the cadets would forget I was there after a few days. I believed many foolish things that morning. The rest of my first day passed without incident. I watched them run drills. I watched them eat lunch. I watched them fail their first combat simulation in a way that seemed almost creative. The cadet called Dawson had tripped over a training cable at the exact moment that caused 3 of his squadmates to collide with each other, which somehow resulted in the entire team landing inside the enemy position by accident. They won the simulation. The instructor looked confused. I wrote in my notes that humans showed unusual problem solving through what appeared to be controlled chaos. That evening, I returned to my office feeling satisfied. I made myself a cup of the earth beverage called coffee, which I had recently begun to enjoy against the warnings of my doctor. I sat at my desk. I opened my research log, and there, placed neatly in the center of my workstation, was a small folded paper object. I had never seen one before. It was a bird made of white paper, carefully folded into triangular shapes that formed wings, a head, and a tail. It was beautiful in a strange, simple way. I picked it up and examined it from every angle. I used my scanner to check for any devices hidden inside. There were none. It was just paper. I photographed it. I cataloged it. I placed it in a small clear container labeled Unknown Artifact, Day 1, Source Unidentified. I assumed it was a gift from one of my colleagues, perhaps as a joke about my new assignment. I thought nothing more of it. The next morning, my coffee was not the right temperature. I had set the machine to prepare it at exactly 81 degrees, which was my preferred setting. When I took the first sip, it was 83 degrees, only 2 degrees off. I frowned. I adjusted the machine. I made another cup, 83 degrees again. I called maintenance. They came. They examined the machine. They said it was working perfectly. They made a cup in front of me, 81 degrees exactly as programmed. I felt strange. I drank the coffee anyway. I went to work. That afternoon, my office chair felt slightly higher than usual. I adjusted it back down. It happened again the next morning, and the next. By the fourth day, I had to admit that someone was raising my chair by exactly 2 centimeters every night. I stayed late one evening to catch whoever was doing it. I watched my office for 6 hours. Nothing happened. I went home. The next morning, the chair was raised again. I changed the lock on my door. It happened again. My datapad started switching to old Earth languages at random times. Latin, Ancient Greek, something called Old English. I would fix the settings. A day later, they would change again. The security logs showed no access to my device. No one had touched it, but the language kept shifting. I began to feel watched, not in the scientific sense of being observed by my research subjects, in a different sense, in the way small mammals feel watched when there is something in the trees above them. I had read about this feeling in human literature but had never experienced it myself. My species does not have natural predators. We have not been prey in 6,000 years. I was being made prey, and I did not yet understand the game. I interviewed the cadets, one by one, in the formal setting of my office. I asked each of them about their daily routines, their whereabouts during specific time windows, their knowledge of any unusual activities in the officer wing of the academy. Each of them was polite. Each of them was helpful. Each of them gave me absolutely nothing. "Doctor, have you checked the security footage?" asked Holt, the cadet from Lagos with the deep, calm voice. "That would probably show you everything you need to know." I had checked the security footage. It was always corrupted during the exact moments when anomalies occurred. 90-second windows. Clean before, clean after, nothing but static in the middle. I asked Holt if she knew how security footage could be corrupted in such a precise pattern. "No idea, doctor," she said. Her face was completely still. Her eyes did not blink. "That sounds like a technical problem. You should probably talk to the engineering department." I talked to the engineering department. They were baffled. They said the corruption pattern was unlike anything they had ever seen. They said it would require either a very sophisticated device or a deep understanding of academy security systems. They said no cadet should have such access. Should have, those words stuck in my mind. One evening, I sat in my office drinking my slightly wrong coffee, staring at the paper bird that had started everything. I had by now collected 12 more of them. They appeared in strange places, on top of my research papers, inside my lunch container, once, somehow, folded around my toothbrush in my private quarters, which was supposed to be impossible, because no one had the access codes except me. Old Vresh came to visit me that night. She looked at the growing collection of paper birds on my shelf. She looked at my tired face. She looked at my half-empty coffee cup. "Vesturial," she said softly, "you need to stop this before it gets worse." "Worse?" I said. Nothing has happened, just small things, just pranks. I can handle pranks. Vresh closed her eyes, all 6 of them. She shook her head slowly. You do not understand what you have started. By announcing that you were observing them, you changed something in them. You issued a challenge. They will not stop now. They will keep going until you either give up or understand. Understand what? I asked. She looked at me with the saddest expression I had ever seen on a Cathari face. Understand that you are not the scientist anymore, my friend. You are the experiment. I did not sleep that night. I sat on my sleeping platform, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her words. I thought about the paper birds. I thought about the coffee. I thought about the chair. I thought about the datapad. I thought about every single small, strange thing that had happened over the past 3 weeks. By morning, I had made a decision. I would not back down. I was a Cathari scholar with 4 doctorates. I would not be defeated by primates who had only just learned to travel between stars. I would set a trap, a perfect trap, something they could not resist, something that would finally prove once and for all that I was the observer and they were the observed. I called it Protocol Observation Prime. I began building it that very day. I did not know then that I was not planning a trap. I was walking deeper into theirs. I did not know that 7 humans working together could outthink a xenobiologist who had studied 1,000 species across 100 worlds. I did not know that the paper birds were not pranks. They were messages. They were their way of telling me, kindly and without words, that I was being hunted. And I did not know that the real game had not even started yet. What had happened so far was only the warm-up. Only the first careful steps of a very patient, very clever pack deciding how they wanted to play with me. As I sat in my office that evening, planning my grand trap with all the confidence of a fool, I looked up at my shelf of paper birds. There were 13 of them now. 1 for each day something strange had happened. A 14th sat on my desk. I had not put it there. I had not seen anyone enter my office. My door had been locked. My windows were sealed. It sat on top of my research notes, right on top of the page where I had written my plans for Protocol Observation Prime, as if someone had read my notes, approved of them, and left a small paper sign of encouragement. My 4 hands began to shake. My 3 hearts pounded in uneven rhythm. For the first time in my long scholarly career, I understood fear, true fear. The kind that small creatures feel when they realize something much bigger and much smarter has been watching them all along. I picked up the paper bird. I unfolded it carefully. There was writing inside, small, neat human handwriting, just 3 words. Keep going, Doctor. Protocol Observation Prime began on a cold Tuesday morning. I had spent 9 sleepless nights planning it. My office had been transformed into what I believed was the most sophisticated observation environment ever constructed at the Academy. I had called in favors from 3 different departments. I had borrowed equipment from the Concord Intelligence Service. I had even requested a quantum entangled witness protocol, which was normally reserved for treaty verification between hostile governments. My office now contained 17 separate surveillance systems. Motion sensors covered every square centimeter of the floor. Thermal imaging scanned continuously. Pressure plates had been installed under the carpet. Chemical markers coated every surface. Hidden cameras watched from angles so unusual that no human eye could have predicted them. I had spent 40,000 credits from my research budget. I did not care. I would catch them. I would finally prove that my mind was greater than theirs. The bait was perfect. I had prepared a sealed case. It was black, made of a metal alloy that my scanners had marked as valuable. On the front, in bold letters, I had written the words "Classified Human Behavioral Study, do not open under any circumstances." Inside the case was nothing of importance, just a simple data chip containing my grocery list. But the cadets did not know that. They would see the case, they would be unable to resist the temptation, and they would try to open it. When they did, every alarm in the building would trigger. I would have them, finally. I placed the case in the center of my desk. I activated all 17 surveillance systems. I locked my office. I went home. I did not come back for 3 days. I wanted to give them time. I wanted them to feel confident. I wanted them to believe I had left the case unattended. On the fourth morning, I returned to my office with the confidence of a hunter who had finally laid the perfect snare. I checked the systems. All 17 showed no activity. Nothing had entered my office. No motion had been detected. No thermal signatures had crossed the threshold. No pressure plates had been pressed. No chemical markers had been disturbed. The case sat exactly where I had left it, untouched, pristine. I felt disappointment and then, strangely, relief. Perhaps the cadets had sensed the trap. Perhaps they had learned to leave me alone. Perhaps my reputation for cleverness had finally convinced them to stop their games. I walked to my desk. I reached for the case. I would open it myself, confirm the data chip was still inside, and then report to the academy that my investigation had concluded without result. My 4 hands froze above the case. There on top of it was a small folded paper bird, bright red this time, made from what looked like a handwritten note. My hearts began to race. I picked up the bird with trembling fingers. I unfolded it carefully. The writing inside was neat and simple. We opened it on the first day. We put it back on the third day. You never noticed. Your thermal imaging has a blind spot at 2.3 meters above the floor. You should tell maintenance. Also, your grocery list needs more vegetables. Signed, Squad 7. I sat down heavily in my chair. I read the note 3 times. I did not understand. I could not understand. I had covered every angle. I had consulted with experts. I had used the finest technology available. And yet somehow, 7 teenagers had walked through my perfect trap, opened my sealed case, read the contents, and replaced everything without leaving a single trace. I checked the blind spot at 2.3 meters. They were correct. There was a small gap in the thermal imaging coverage where 2 cameras did not quite overlap. It was a flaw so small that I had missed it during my 3 inspections. But they had found it. In 1 day. Perhaps in 1 hour. Perhaps in less. I sat at my desk for a long time. My coffee grew cold. The paper bird sat in front of me, its wings spread as if mocking my entire profession. I began to understand something terrible, something that shook me to the core of my being. I had been outplayed, not just defeated, outplayed. There was a difference. Defeat happened when an opponent was stronger or faster. Being outplayed happened when an opponent understood you better than you understood yourself. The cadets had not beaten my trap. They had seen my trap coming from the moment I had begun planning it. Perhaps they had known about Protocol Observation Prime before I had even named it. I left my office that afternoon and walked across the academy grounds to the administration building. I had an appointment with someone I had been avoiding for weeks, Commodore Whitfield, the Terran cultural advisor, a retired human officer who had served in the Secession Wars and now taught a class called Understanding Other Species for Diplomats. I had not wanted to speak with him because his office smelled strongly of pipe tobacco and I did not enjoy the scent, but I had no choice now. Commodore Whitfield was a tall man with white hair and a face that carried many lines. He had dark eyes that looked like they had seen things I could not imagine. When I entered his office, he was sitting behind a wooden desk, smoking a long pipe, reading something on paper, actual paper. He did not even use a datapad. I found it barbaric but also somehow impressive. "Dr. Makhan Thresh," he said without looking up, "I have been expecting you for 3 weeks. I sat down across from him. I did not know how to begin. I had never failed before, not like this. Not so completely. "I need your help," I said. "I am being outmaneuvered by 7 cadets from your world, and I do not understand why." He set down his paper. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he began to laugh, not a small laugh, a full, deep, rolling laugh that lasted for nearly a full minute. I waited. My mandibles clicked softly with embarrassment. When he finally stopped, he wiped a tear from his eye and looked at me with something like sympathy. "Doctor," he said, "let me ask you a question. Why do you think humans do the things we do?" "For survival," I said. "For advancement, for scientific progress, for social bonds, for reproduction, for resources." He shook his head. He took a slow puff from his pipe. Smoke curled around his face. "All of those things, yes. Sometimes. But those are the reasons other species do things. Humans have an extra reason. A reason that confuses every other species in the conquered. Do you know what that reason is? I did not know, I said so. Fun, he said simply. Humans do things for fun, Doctor. We hunt when we are not hungry. We compete when there is nothing to win. We solve puzzles that no one asked us to solve. We play games that serve no purpose other than the pleasure of playing them. When you told those 7 cadets that you were studying them, you did not just begin an observation program. You gave them a new game to play. And humans, Doctor, love games. I felt cold. My exoskeleton tightened with a primal reaction I had not experienced in decades. But I am a scientist, I said. I am not a game. Commodore Whitfield smiled gently. It was not cruel. It was the smile of a teacher explaining something difficult to a young student. To you, you are a scientist. To them, you are the most interesting game they have ever played. You are a puzzle with 4 arms and a bad coffee habit. You are a challenge they did not expect to find at a military academy. And because you announced yourself as the observer, because you explained your methods, because you told them where you would be watching from, you made the game irresistible. You essentially handed them the rules and said, "Now try to get past me." I closed my eyes. I understood now. Too late, far too late. "What do I do?" I asked. My voice was small. Commodore Whitfield took another puff of his pipe. He looked at me with genuine kindness. "Doctor, I will give you advice that I wish someone had given me 40 years ago. When humans decide to play a game with you, there are only 3 outcomes. You can try to win, which is impossible because we do not play to win. We play to play. You can give up, which ends the game but leaves you feeling defeated forever. Or you can learn to play with us, which requires skills your species does not have yet." "What skills?" I asked. "The ability to lose gracefully, the ability to laugh at yourself, the ability to enjoy being surprised. These are human skills. Cathari do not have them. Your species treats every failure as a scientific error that must be corrected, but humans treat failure as an invitation to try again with more creativity. That is why we are dangerous, Doctor, not because we are strong, not because we are smart, but because we do not know when to stop playing." He leaned forward across the desk. "My advice to you is simple. Transfer. Request a new assignment. There is a research station on Threnara 9 that studies acid wasps. The acid wasps are very dangerous. They kill 3 researchers every year, but they do not play games. They will not put paper birds on your desk. They will not raise your chair 2 centimeters every night. They will not make your coffee the wrong temperature. They will only try to kill you, which is much simpler and easier to understand." I thanked him. I stood up. I walked out of his office. I returned to my own office. I sat at my desk. I stared at the paper bird that still mocked me from its place on my research notes. I should have filed the transfer request that afternoon. Any sensible Cathari would have done so. Any careful scientist would have recognized the wisdom of the Commodore's words and acted on them immediately. But I was not sensible that afternoon. I was angry. I was embarrassed. I was proud. And I made the worst decision of my academic career. I decided to try one more time. If they could hide from my 17 surveillance systems, I would use something they could not detect. I had access to a piece of equipment so advanced, so secret, that only 3 individuals in the Concord had ever been permitted to use it: the cloaking field. It was a device developed for the diplomatic corps. It made the wearer completely invisible to every known form of detection. No light, no heat, no sound, no scent, no vibration. The wearer essentially ceased to exist in measurable reality for the duration of the field's operation. I requested its use. I cited my ongoing research. I pulled every string I had developed over my 20 years of academic service. 3 days later, the cloaking field arrived at my office in a sealed case that required my DNA signature to open. I read the instruction manual. I practiced the activation sequence. I prepared myself for what would be the final experiment of Protocol Observation Prime. I would observe the cadets in their natural environment. The cadet commons, the large room where they gathered between training exercises. I would stand in their midst, completely invisible, and I would finally see them as they truly were when they believed no one was watching. I put on the cloaking field, I activated it, I walked across the academy grounds toward the cadet commons. I felt powerful for the first time in weeks. The device made me feel like a god. I was invisible, I was untouchable, I was the perfect observer. No human could detect me, no technology could find me. I was beyond their games now. I was above them. I reached the commons. The door opened for a cadet who was leaving. I slipped inside behind her. I moved carefully to a corner of the room. I stood still. I began to observe. The 7 cadets were scattered across the commons. Some were studying. Some were playing a card game. Some were simply talking quietly. I watched them for perhaps 3 minutes. I took mental notes. I began to feel satisfied. This was what proper xenobiology looked like, pure observation without interference. Then Cadet Hayes, who was reading a book at a table near the window, spoke without looking up. "Hello, Dr. Maconthresh." Time stopped. My 3 hearts forgot their rhythm. My 4 hands froze at my sides. The cloaking field was operating perfectly. Every indicator on my wrist display showed green. I was invisible. I was undetectable. I was beyond their reach. But Cadet Hayes had just said my name. One by one, the other 6 cadets looked up from their activities. They all turned their heads toward the exact spot where I was standing. 7 pairs of human eyes focused on my invisible form. 7 human smiles appeared at once. That terrible, wonderful, teeth-showing smile that meant nothing good at all. And that was when I knew. I knew with absolute certainty. I knew in the deepest part of my ancient Cathari soul. The game had been building toward this moment for 3 entire months, and I had just walked willingly into its center. My name is Dr. Vesturial Maconthresh. I have 4 doctorates, and I was about to run from 7 teenagers through the hallways of the Galactic Concord Academy like a small animal fleeing from clever predators. I did not move. I could not move. Every muscle in my body had locked into place. The cadets were all looking at me. 7 sets of eyes fixed on empty air where I stood invisible and yet somehow seen. Cadet Hayes set down her book with deliberate slowness. She stood up from her chair. She smiled wider. "You left footprints, Doctor," she said softly, "in the carpet fibers. We have been tracking you for about 20 minutes, ever since you crossed the entrance mat." I looked down. I could not see my own feet because of the cloaking field, but I could see the path I had walked across the room. The carpet fibers had been pressed down by my weight. Small indentations marked every step I had taken. Invisible myself, I had left a perfect trail of footprints behind me like a child walking through fresh snow. My cloaking field hid me from every known form of detection except the simplest one of all. The same method hunters on 100 primitive worlds had used for thousands of years, looking at the ground, looking for disturbed earth, looking for pressed grass, looking for the evidence that a creature had passed through. Cadet Dawson stood up now, then Fletcher, then the others. They did not rush. They did not move quickly. They simply rose from their seats with the calm coordination of a group that had planned this moment for a very long time. The card game was paused. The book was closed. The quiet conversations ended. "Do not worry, Doctor," said Cadet Parker, her dark eyes shining with something I could not read. "We just want to talk." My brain, which had served me faithfully through 4 doctorates and 20 years of research, made a decision without consulting me. My body made a decision without consulting my brain. Some ancient instinct, buried so deep in my species that I had never known it existed, took complete control of me. I ran. I ran from the cadet commons. I ran through the door and into the hallway. I ran without a plan, without a destination, without any thought beyond the single burning need to be anywhere except in that room. My 4 legs moved in the rhythm my species had not used in 6,000 years. The fleeing rhythm, the prey rhythm, the rhythm that small Cathari had used long before we built cities, before we built ships, before we left our homeworld, back when we had still been hunted. Behind me, I heard them follow. They did not run, that was the terrible part. They did not chase me. They walked, calmly, steadily. I could hear their boots on the polished floor. I could hear their quiet conversation. I could hear Cadet Fletcher whistling. Actually whistling. A small, cheerful tune that floated down the hallway behind me like a blade of ice sliding down my spine. I turned left at the first intersection. I could hear them coming. Not hurrying. Not concerned. I turned right at the next corridor. The whistling continued. I could hear Cadet Hayes making a joke. I could hear Cadet Brooks laughing at it. They were having a pleasant afternoon while I ran for my life. I deactivated the cloaking field as I ran. It had become useless, worse than useless. It was showing them exactly where I was going because of the footprints I could not avoid leaving. I needed to be on hard floor. I needed surfaces that would not betray me. I turned down a corridor that led toward the science wing. The floor there was smooth tile. I would leave no trail on tile. Behind me, the whistling stopped. For a moment, I thought I had lost them. Then I heard Cadet Quinn speak. Quinn, the quiet one who rarely said anything at all. He went toward the science wing. The tile hallways, smart choice. Fletcher, you take the western corridor. Parker and Dawson cover the main staircase. Holt and Brooks block the east exit. Hayes, you are with me. They were splitting up. They were predicting my movements. They were coordinating without needing to discuss it in detail, as if they had practiced this kind of pursuit 1,000 times before. My 3 hearts pounded so hard that I feared they would stop entirely. I kept running. I took a staircase down 2 levels. I doubled back along a maintenance corridor. I hid behind a large storage container for almost a full minute listening. I heard nothing. I allowed myself to hope. Perhaps I had lost them. Perhaps their coordination was not as good as it sounded. Then I heard a soft voice from the other side of the storage container. "Hello, Doctor." Cadet Holt stepped around the corner. She was not out of breath. She had not run. She had simply known I would come to this exact spot. She smiled at me with that same terrible friendliness. I ran again. This time I ran toward the only place I could think of where I might find safety. The main administrative wing. If I could reach Commodore Whitfield's office, if I could explain the situation, if I could get a senior officer to call off the cadets, perhaps I could survive this afternoon with some portion of my dignity intact. I burst into the administrative wing at full speed. Several staff members looked up from their desks in surprise. A Cathari scholar sprinting through the hallways was not a common sight. I did not stop to explain. I headed for Commodore Whitfield's office door. I was perhaps 15 meters away when Cadet Parker stepped out of a side corridor directly in front of me. "He is not in today, Doctor," she said pleasantly. "He had a dental appointment. Did he not tell you? I checked his schedule this morning." I turned and ran the other way. Cadet Fletcher stood at that end of the corridor, waiting, smiling, still whistling. I took the emergency stairs. I did not know where I was going anymore. I was simply running. My legs moved without my command. My mind had become a blur of colors and noise. I emerged into a basement level I had never visited before. Storage rooms lined the hallway. Some of them had been converted into supply closets for the academy maintenance staff. I saw an open door. I did not think. I simply dove through it. I slammed it shut. I fumbled with the locking mechanism and secured it. I stood in the dark, surrounded by mops and buckets and cleaning supplies, my 4 hands pressed against the door, my 3 hearts beating so hard I could barely hear anything else. For a long moment there was silence. Then very softly, a knock on the door. "Doctor," said Cadet Parker's voice. "Are you all right in there? We brought you tea. We know you like the green variety now. Can we come in and talk? We are not going to do anything. We just want to talk." I did not answer. I could not answer. I activated my emergency beacon. I sent a distress signal to campus security. I slid down against the door and sat on the cold floor of the supply closet, surrounded by cleaning products that smelled of chemicals my species found slightly nauseating. Outside the door, the 7 cadets waited. They did not try to force the door. They did not make threats. They did not even speak much. Occasionally, one of them would say something quiet, like commenting on the weather or asking another if they had finished their homework. They simply waited with the infinite patience of predators who knew their prey could not stay hidden forever. I waited too. I waited for security. I waited for rescue. I waited for some power greater than my own to come and end this impossible afternoon. 47 minutes passed. I know because I timed it. My datapad still worked. I used it to fill out my official transfer request. I requested reassignment to the research station on Threnara 9. I requested it to be effective immediately. I requested it to be permanent. I did not care about the acid wasps. I did not care about the 3 researchers who died every year. I would take my chances with chemical burns and mandible melting venom. Acid wasps, at least, were honest about their intentions. Finally, I heard the sound I had been waiting for. Boots, heavy boots, campus security. I heard them ask the cadets to step aside. I heard the cadets comply politely. I heard the security officers knock on the door. Dr. Makanthresh, this is campus security. You are safe now. Please open the door. I opened the door. 2 large security officers stood outside. Behind them, in a neat line, stood the 7 cadets. All of them held small gifts. Cadet Parker held a cup of tea. Cadet Quinn held a get-well card. Cadet Hayes held flowers that she had gotten from somewhere. Cadet Dawson held a folded paper bird, this one gold, larger than any I had seen before. "We were worried about you, Doctor," said Cadet Parker gently. "We heard you ran into the basement. We thought maybe you were not feeling well." The security officers looked between me and the cadets with expressions of deep confusion. One of them cleared his throat. "Doctor, the cadets say they were trying to return a research paper you left in the Commons. Is there something we should know about this situation?" I looked at the cadets. I looked at the security officers. I looked at the paper bird in Cadet Dawson's hands. I thought about everything that had happened. The coffee, the chair, the datapad, the sealed case, the cloaking field, the footprints, the whistling, the 47 minutes in this terrible closet. I thought about what I could possibly tell the security officers. That I had been pursued by 7 polite cadets who had brought me tea. That they had caught me using equipment borrowed from the diplomatic corps. That I had sealed myself in a supply closet because I had heard humans whistling behind me in a hallway. "No," I said finally. My voice sounded small and tired. "There is no situation. I was simply not feeling well. I appreciate the concern. I apologize for the inconvenience." Cadet Dawson stepped forward. He offered me the gold paper bird. I accepted it with trembling hands. He smiled at me, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw something in his eyes that was not amusement. It was something warmer, something that might have been respect. "You made it further than anyone told us you would, Doctor," he said quietly, so only I could hear. "You figured out the tile hallways. That was clever. Most scientists would have kept running on the carpet." I did not know what to say. I simply nodded. He stepped back into the line of cadets. The security officers escorted me to the medical wing. The cadets followed at a respectful distance, still holding their gifts. At the medical wing, the doctors checked me for injuries and found none. They noted that my stress levels were elevated and suggested I take several days of leave. They recommended I speak with a counselor about what they called my anxiety attack. I did not correct them. I did not try to explain. No one would have believed me anyway. That evening, I sat in my quarters with my datapad and the gold paper bird. I unfolded it slowly. As I had expected, there was writing inside, 7 different sets of handwriting. Each cadet had written 1 line. It was a short letter. "Thank you for being a good sport, Doctor," wrote Parker. "We hope you enjoyed the game," wrote Dawson. "You were our favorite target yet," wrote Fletcher. "We learned a lot from you," wrote Holt. "You are smarter than we expected," wrote Brooks. "Please do not transfer," wrote Hayes. And at the bottom, in small, careful letters, Quinn had written the last line. "But we understand if you have to go. Good luck with the wasps." I stared at the letter for a long time. My 4 hands shook. My 3 hearts beat in complicated rhythms. I did not cry because Cathari cannot cry, but I made a sound that my species reserves for the deepest kind of emotion. A soft clicking hum that rises from the throat and means many things at once. Fear, wonder, exhaustion, and something else I had not expected to feel. something that might have been the beginning of understanding. But understanding came too late. My transfer request had already been submitted. The reply came at dawn the next morning. Approved. Effective in 3 days. I was going to Threnara 9. I was going to study acid wasps. I was leaving the 7 most dangerous young creatures I had ever encountered. And yet, as I packed my belongings, I found myself carefully wrapping each of the 14 paper birds in soft cloth and placing them inside my personal case. I did not ask myself why. I simply knew I could not leave them behind. They were the most interesting artifacts I had ever collected in my 20-year career. I would take them with me to Threnara 9. They would sit on my new desk. They would remind me every day of what I had learned about humans and about myself. They would remind me that some species could not be studied from a distance. Some species had to be experienced. And some species, if you were very unlucky, decided to experience you right back. My last day at the academy arrived with gray skis and a cold wind from the northern mountains. I had packed everything I owned. My research equipment had been shipped ahead to Threnara 9. My office stood empty. My quarters were bare. Only the 14 paper birds remained with me, wrapped in cloth and placed in a small wooden box that Commodore Whitfield had given me as a parting gift. "For your collection," he had said when he handed it to me. "Every researcher should have a box of reminders, things that teach us who we really are. Keep those paper birds close, Doctor. They cost you more than you realize." I had not asked him what he meant. I had a suspicion that he was referring to my pride, to my certainty, to my belief that knowledge gave me power over every species I studied. The 7 cadets had taught me otherwise. They had taught me that some things could not be learned from books. Some things had to be felt. I walked to the shuttle pad alone. The morning light made the academy buildings look soft and distant. I thought I would leave quietly. I thought no one would come to see me off. It was better that way. A quiet departure. A clean transition. I had caused enough trouble on this world already. But when I reached the shuttle pad, 7 figures stood waiting. They were in their dress uniforms, black with silver trim. Their boots were polished. Their hair was neat. They stood in a proper line, the way cadets were supposed to stand during official ceremonies. Squad 7 had come to say goodbye. I stopped walking. I did not know what to do. My luggage trolley hummed quietly beside me. My 4 hands gripped the handle tightly. I considered turning around and finding another shuttle pad. There had to be another one on the academy grounds. I could leave from the north pad instead. No one would have to see me. No one would have to speak. But Cadet Parker saw me before I could retreat. She raised her hand in greeting. The other 6 turned their heads. They did not smile this time. Not the big teeth showing smiles that had terrified me for 3 months. They simply looked at me with quiet, serious expressions. Cadet Hayes took a step forward from the line. "Dr. Makan Thresh," she said in a formal tone, "we understand you are leaving today. We wanted to see you off properly. May we have a few moments of your time before you depart?" I did not speak. My translator did not have words for what I was feeling. I nodded instead. A small nod. Cadet Parker stepped forward and met me halfway across the pad. She held something in her hands. A large flat package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," she said. "From all of us. You do not have to open it now, but please take it with you to Threnara 9. I accepted the package. It was heavier than I expected. I tucked it carefully into my luggage trolley. I looked at the 7 young humans who had made the last 3 months of my life both impossible and fascinating. I realized, standing there in the cold morning air, that I did not hate them. I had thought I did. For many nights, lying awake in my quarters, I had told myself that I hated these creatures. But looking at them now, in their proper uniforms, I felt something entirely different. I felt, strangely, that I would miss them. "Cadets," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I must confess something to you. When I agreed to observe your squad, I believed I would produce the greatest xenobiological study of the century. I believed I would understand humans so completely that my research would become required reading at every academy in the Concord." Cadet Fletcher smiled a small smile, not the teeth-showing smile, a gentle one. He did not interrupt me. Instead, I continued, you taught me that I had understood nothing. You taught me that humans are not what I believed you to be. You taught me that observation is not science when the subjects are clever enough to observe the observer. You taught me humility. You taught me fear. You taught me wonder. And you taught me that some mysteries cannot be solved from a safe distance. I paused. I gathered my thoughts. The shuttle that would take me to the orbital station was approaching in the distance. I could see its lights through the gray sky. I will be writing a paper about my time with you. I have already begun drafting it. I will submit it to the Concord Scientific Council. It will be the most honest paper I have ever written, and it will contain one warning above all others. Would you like to hear it? The 7 cadets nodded silently. I will warn every xenobiologist in the Concord that humans are not a species to be studied from behind glass. I will warn them that humans are not patient subjects who sit still to be measured. I will warn them that humans are the most dangerous kind of scientific mystery, the kind that studies back. Cadet Dawson laughed softly. The others smiled. And the final line of my paper, I said, will be this: if they offer you tea, it is already too late. All 7 of them laughed now, true laughs, warm human laughs, the kind that I had once found disturbing but now found somehow comforting. Cadet Quinn, the quiet one, stepped forward next. She looked up at me with her serious blue eyes. Doctor, she said, may I tell you something that we have never told anyone? I nodded. We chose you. When we arrived at the academy and heard that a Cathari scholar wanted to study us, we talked about it among ourselves. We could have been assigned to any of 7 different observers. We requested you specifically. Do you know why? I did not. Because you were the only one who told us the truth. The other observers planned to study us secretly without our knowledge. We read their proposals before we arrived. We have ways of accessing information that your colleagues did not expect. But you, Doctor, you were the only one who planned to tell us what you were doing. You believed in open science. You believed in honesty. We liked that. So we chose you. I stared at her. I did not know what to say. And when we began our game, she continued, we had rules. We never hurt you. We never damaged your property. We never interfered with your work in any meaningful way. Every prank was carefully designed to be recoverable. We respected you, Doctor. Even when you were running from us in the hallways, we respected you the entire time. Cadet Holt stepped forward next. The paper birds were something Parker and Dawson came up with. They are from an Earth tradition. In Japan, there is a belief that if you fold 1,000 paper birds, you will receive a wish. We did not fold 1,000, of course, but each bird meant something. Each one was a thank you for being a worthy challenge, for taking our game seriously, for pushing us to be cleverer than we had been before. I felt my 3 hearts warm with an emotion my species rarely experienced: gratitude. And the last thing we want you to know, said Cadet Brooks, is that we grew from this, all 7 of us. You taught us that it is possible to disagree with someone and still respect them. You taught us that opponents can become something else if the game is played honestly. We came to this academy as 7 cadets. We leave it as 7 officers. And part of who we have become is because of you, Doctor. My translator was struggling now. There were words in Cathari that did not translate well, but I did my best. And part of who I have become is because of you, I said quietly. I came to this academy believing I was a great scientist. I leave it knowing I was only beginning to understand what science really is. You have taught me more than any textbook I have ever read. I am grateful, even though I am transferring, even though I am fleeing. I am grateful. Cadet Parker laughed. You are not fleeing, Doctor. You are simply changing your field of study. Acid wasps are a legitimate research subject, and I think you will do well there. You have learned something important. You have learned to watch your back. The acid wasps will not be as clever as we were, but you will be ready for them all the same. The shuttle arrived at the pad. Its engines whined to a stop. The boarding ramp lowered slowly. I had perhaps 2 minutes before it would depart. I have one last question, I said. How did Cadet Hayes know I was in the Commons while I was using the cloaking field? The 7 cadets looked at each other. They seemed to be deciding whether to tell me. Finally, Cadet Hayes stepped forward herself. "Doctor, I will tell you, but you must promise never to write about it, never to tell your colleagues. It will be our last secret." I promised. The cloaking field hides you from technology. It hides you from most senses, but it cannot hide you from a human nose that has been paying attention for 3 months. You wear a specific combination of scents, doctor, the K-Thari scale cleaner you use, the tea you have started drinking, the chemicals in your translator device, your natural body scent. Together, they form a smell that is entirely unique to you. I smelled you walk into the commons. I did not need to see you. I simply needed to breathe. I was speechless. For the second time in my career, I was completely speechless. "You have been watching me so closely that you learned my scent?" I asked. "Yes," said Cadet Hayes simply. "That is what good observers do, doctor. We watch, we listen, we smell, we remember. You taught us that yourself. In your first lecture, you said that the best xenobiologists use all of their senses. We took your advice to heart." I laughed then. I actually laughed. A K-Thari laugh, which sounds strange to human ears but is still a laugh. I laughed until my exoskeleton shook. I laughed until the tears I could not shed welled up in my eyes anyway. I had been defeated by my own teachings. I had armed them with the very knowledge they had used to defeat me. The loudspeaker announced that my shuttle was ready to depart. I had to board now. I looked at the 7 cadets one last time. I raised all 4 of my hands in the formal K-Thari gesture of farewell and respect. It was a gesture reserved for elders, for mentors, for those who had taught important lessons. It was not typically offered to students. The cadets seemed to understand. All 7 of them saluted in return. Not a cadet salute, a full officer salute, something they were not technically supposed to do until their graduation ceremony. I boarded the shuttle. The ramp closed behind me. The engines roared to life. I took my seat and watched through the window as 7 young humans stood on the pad below, watching me leave. They did not wave. They simply stood in formation, saluting, until the shuttle lifted into the clouds and they disappeared from my sight. I opened the package they had given me during the long flight to the orbital station. Inside was a single piece of art. A large painting, carefully made by hand, showing a K-Thari scholar surrounded by 7 figures. The scholar wore formal research robes. He was looking at a 14th paper bird with an expression of wonder. The 7 figures behind him were not in threatening poses. They were in a circle around him, protective, watchful, like a family. At the bottom of the painting, 7 small signatures marked the corners, and underneath, in careful script, was written a single line. "For Dr. Makanthresh, the scientist who became part of our pack, please come back someday." I wept then. K-Thari can weep actually, though it happens very rarely. I wept for the entire flight to the orbital station. I wept because I understood, finally, that I had not been hunted by predators. I had been adopted by a pack, and I had been too afraid and too proud to see it. 6 years passed on Threnara 9. I studied the acid wasps. I published papers. I became respected in my new field. The wasps killed 2 of my colleagues during my time there. They never tried to kill me. Perhaps they sensed I had already survived something more dangerous than their venom. The 14 paper birds sat on my desk. Every morning I looked at them. Every evening I whispered a small greeting to them in my own language. They were my friends, my strange, folded paper friends. And then one morning a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a small origami crane, white like the first one, and a short note written in 7 different handwritings. Parker made admiral, Hayes made captain, Dawson made captain, Fletcher made commander, Holt made commander, Brooks made lieutenant. Quinn left the military and writes children's books now. We still think about you often. If you are ever tired of the wasps, you could visit us. The Concord Academy has a new observation program. We have been asking about you. Come play the game with a new group of cadets. We think you would teach them well. We will put the kettle on. I stared at the note for a long time. I stared at the small white paper bird. I looked at my collection of 14 old birds. I looked at my research on the acid wasps. I looked at my quiet office on this quiet research station. I picked up my pen. I wrote my reply. Keep the kettle on. I will arrive in 3 months. My name is Dr. Vesturial Makon Thresh. I once filed a transfer request 47 minutes after 7 cadets cornered me in a supply closet. I once fled from them through the hallways of a galactic academy. I once believed they were the most dangerous species I had ever encountered. I was right about that. They were dangerous, but I was wrong about everything else. Because the most dangerous species in the galaxy is not the one that hunts you. It is the one that chooses you. The one that decides you are worthy of their attention. The one that plays with you, teaches you, tests you, and invites you into their pack, whether you understood the invitation or not. Humans did not defeat me. Humans made me family. And now I am going home to play the game again. This time I will not run. This time I will fold paper birds of my own. This time when they offer me tea, I will accept it with all 4 of my hands. Because I finally understand what the Commodore meant. I finally understand what old Vresh was trying to tell me. I finally understand what the cadets were teaching me all along. Humans do not study you to know you. They study you to love you. And once they decide they love you, they never stop. Not even across 6 years. Not even across many star systems. Not even across entire species. If you are a young xenobiologist reading this, I have advice for you. Listen carefully. When you receive your first human assignment, do not plan your research methods. Do not prepare your equipment. Do not design your observation protocols. Just do one thing. Learn how to fold a paper bird. You will need to know how someday. When it is your turn to leave one on their desk. When it is your turn to say hello to them in a way they will understand. When it is your turn to be one of the pack.